Hello, everybody. So today I want to talk about SolarEdge because I made a big decision yesterday. I bought SolarEdge stock. I've been looking at this stock a little more over the past few weeks now. And as I make this video, this is my thought of SolarEdge. My thought of SolarEdge is that I'm buying in for a low price because that stock is ridiculously underpriced. Like, I don't understand why it's so cheap. That's point number one. But point number two is it a case of buying for a low price but stay for the European commercial business? And you'll understand why I say this, because I dug through the numbers and I looked at the conference call, and I can make a fairly clear case that this is a European commercial business mostly, despite the narrative. And there is a disconnect between the narrative of SolarEdge and where their revenue mostly comes from and where it's mostly headed and going to come from. But there's no denying that at this price, it's ridiculous. This stock is twice as cheap as Enphase. We're talking about a stock top 10 average annual return in the S&P 500 of the past 10 years. It's in the top 10. It's a longer stock with like Nvidia, like Tesla, like Enphase. Like, this is a company that's been in the top 10. And this drop is ridiculous because, wait until you see the growth rates. I can make a very strong case that this stock is only dropping on narrative, right? Oh, US sales are going to be bad, the stock is dropping. Well, wait until you see how low the US is a market for SolarEdge. It's not a big market at all for SolarEdge, and this really correlates with what I hear from installers around here, which is in the US. Enphase is leading. Enphase is the leader in the US, right? SolarEdge is not the leader in the US, yet the stock is crashing because the stock market is very US-centric. I guess is my only explanation. You'll see this business is very interesting. So let me get started. So a little preface here. I am still more bullish than ever on Enphase and than I've ever been on Enphase. I live in the US. Enphase is everywhere. When I go to different type of home shows, Enphase is always promoted and recommended by most of the installers. My neighbors are getting Enphase. Enphase is the absolute leader here in the US. I'm more bullish than ever, and it's what I see, right? It's what I see. And so that's why. And I'm also a firm believer, and you'll see at the end of the video, I'm also a firm believer in microinverters. And if you watch my prior videos, you know my arguments in favor of microinverters, but I'll go briefly through them again. So to me, Enphase, they have the right solution mostly for residential solar. And I think microinverters are better suited for residential solar. However, what would make me interested in string inverters, in central inverters, or string inverters as they're called? Why would I be interested in that? Well, I would be interested in string inverters because it's clear to me that central inverters make more sense for commercial businesses for now. And one of the key reasons, of course, is because commercial electricity is three-phased electricity, tri-phase. And three-phase electricity, Enphase is developing microinverters for 3P, but it's not there yet, right? They're not yet there in the triple phase current. String inverters are there. String inverters, it is their prime time for these commercial installs. And this is where I think there's a lot of valuable information in the last call. Listening to the CFO, the SolarEdge CFO in the last call, here's what we learned. 60% of inverter shipments were for commercial installs, and this is a mostly inverter business. So 60% roughly of their business is for commercial installations. 40% is for residential installations. And in the US, inverter sales total, so both commercial and residential, are only 15% of SolarEdge's business. So only 15%. So this is a stock that has crashed because of issues with the US and a warning on the revenue in the US that they've issued a few months back. The stock crashed. And the US is 15% of the business. That makes very little sense to me. This market is entirely overreacting. The narrative is negative on this stock, but it's not that material when it's only 15% of your sales. And this is where this is even more important to me. What matters in a business is where is the business headed? Where is the business headed? Well, let me tell you where the business is headed. So when you look at the data from the Q2 conference call, we know that commercial sales are up 115% for SolarEdge. Their commercial sales are up 115%. And their residential sales are only up 49%. Now, what's very interesting, in Europe, the growth of Enphase in Europe is actually more than 100%. So to me, it's clear that Enphase is doing really well in the commercial business, in the residential business in Europe, and both of these businesses are rising and doing really well. But really, to me, where SolarEdge shines is in the commercial sales. The commercial sales are up 115%. That's where they shine, and there's narratives, of course, and that's the current narrative about sales are going to be down in the U.S. 15% of business. That's the narrative, and then you also have facts, and this is the fact for SolarEdge. And if you assume inertia and 1 year out, so the fact is 60% of the business right now growing at 115% year over year. So we have inertia. It's gonna grow at least. I would think it will grow 100% this year, right? Next 12 months. Residential business 40% of the business, growing 49% year over year. Europe is 76% of total sales. 76% of total sales is what Europe is. So 1 year from now, if this inertia continues, and we invest for the future, right? I invest for what the business is going to be in the future, not for what it is right now. 1 year from now, in my view, if you take these numbers and extrapolate them, what do you get? You get a business that should be 70% commercial. If this inertia continues next year, next 12 months, it should be a 70% commercial business, 30% residential, and likely 80% Europe if inertia continues. So this is a business that's traded in the US. That's on the S&P 500. That has a lot of US-based shareholders, but it's a mostly European business and a mostly commercial business. And so my arguments that I make about why I prefer microinverters are really irrelevant in the context of discussing SolarEdge when you dig deeper, because this is a business whose main sales are going to be commercial. And so my arguments on microinverters are true in my view and can be true while still finding SolarEdge compelling, because for what they do, commercial is what matters. So now that I've put these growth figures out there, let's go and let's do just a regular analysis as to what SolarEdge does. So what does SolarEdge do? 70% of the business next year, not competing with Enphase, is the commercial solution. And if you go on their website, you can clearly see they put the commercial forward. Understandably so. That's what most people going on their website look for. So what do? They have big inverters, these three-phase inverters, 120 kilowatts. Ouch, that's a huge inverter, right? That's a big inverter, right? They do carports to park your car. These are very popular in Europe. These in my view, will become popular in the US too, right? They have their own chargers. Very important, right? If you install carport, you also need to be able to offer a solution for chargers. So they do their optimizers, and they sell those optimizers for both commercial and residential applications. If you watch my last video on Tigo, you may know that optimizers oftentimes are selected by large projects, by any projects, for compliance with codes. Because if you don't have an optimizer, you don't have shut-off at the panel level, and firefighters can't intervene on your property. And if then you can't get insurance. There's a bunch of issues. There's a bunch of reasons why, and it's common sense too, right? That you would have a shut-off at the solar panel level, because if there is a natural disaster of any kind, there needs to be no more power in the building for emergency services. So that's why a lot of optimizers are getting sold. Anyways, this is what they do. Their three-phase commercial products are doing very well, and it's 70% of the business, these commercial inverters. And these make more sense because when you're going to have a large, very, very large PV install and you get it financed, the return on investment that you make is oftentimes the chief consideration for these industries and these commercial buildings. That's what they consider the most. So I think this is very relevant here to look at that. Now let's look at 30% of a business. 30% of a business, now that is a business that is directly competing with Enphase. And this is where I say in my view, SolarEdge is going to sell less. They're going to sell less than Enphase. So let me go first of all for pros. Why are there some pros for SolarEdge and the SolarEdge system, which is, let's remember this, it's the inverter. It's all about the inverter. A solar energy system sell to a residential customer is going to be all about the inverter, because they all offer that, right? The emergency backup, the smart home interface, the cloud storage, the data. This is something that's offered by most providers of whole house solutions. That's not what they differentiate themselves on. Even the battery charger, right? Enphase has its own battery charger. So that's not where you differentiate yourself. You differentiate yourself on the inverter. Inversion is so important, right? That's what makes electricity from DC, from the solar panels, usable by your house. So why would central inverters be better? Well, if you're dealing with a price-only buyer, with a price-sensitive only buyer, which is, in my view, never recommended, especially if it's your home, if it's your forever home. But if you're dealing with that, Solar. I keep saying Enphase because I make Enphase videos all the time. SolarEdge is going to be cheaper. SolarEdge is going to be cheaper if you have no warranty extension. If you purchase a warranty extension, it is not the case anymore. But if you have no warranty extension, which most people don't get that extension on the warranty, you're going to get a 12-year warranty, and it's going to be cheaper on the day of your installs. Installers also make a bit more money at install on SolarEdge system. And I know this from SolarSurge, which is a channel that I recommend, which is a channel dedicated to installers and giving training to installers. We know that SolarEdge pays a little more for PV installers for their systems than Enphase. There's bigger commissions. Installers sometimes view warranty calls are as easier for SolarEdge. Because you don't have to go on the roof to replace the microinverter. You can just replace the central inverter. But we'll see there's big issues with that. Oftentimes you have to order the inverter again when you replace it. So the homeowner is without a system for multiple days at a time. So that's one issue. And then it's a big expense each time to replace that inverter. It's a much bigger expense than, say, replacing an inverter for a microinverter, which is just one panel. Then you have one argument that has been put forward a lot lately, which is slightly more efficient. But by slightly more efficient, I want to point out that we're talking less than 5% total on free conversions. That's the difference in efficiency, i.e. wait 6 months to solar panels get better, and that efficiency gets canceled out because solar panels get better year after year after year after year. Solar panels are like flat screen TV. So they get better and cheaper year after year. And then you also have the clipping sales pitch. Now, this is a fascinating point, but a lot of sellers of solar systems will show you the lab operating conditions of solar panels, and so plenty of solar panels are 500 watts, and they'll show you this is a 500 watt solar panel. They'll show you the lab condition of operation, and the normal operating condition of a solar panel that's 500 watt is gonna be like technically 380, 400 watt in normal conditions, and Enphase microinverters are marketed for normal condition operations and not for lab conditions. And so oftentimes when the installer is trying to sell an Enphase system, they'll be like, look, this is a 500 watt panel. The microinverter from Enphase are 384 watt. Don't get that. That's totally pointless. You're going to have 120 watt of clipping. Now that is not true. That is not true because your solar panel is never going to yield 500 watts. Even on the best day, which is a summer day, it's not possible for a solar panel to yield 500 watts because a summer day is also going to be much, 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 much hotter than 25 degrees Celsius. Right? It's going to be more like 50 degrees Celsius at the solar panel level, and so you're going to lose efficiency. And so oftentimes the homeowner who digs deeper will realize that that sales pitch does not work, but it's nonetheless a sales pitch. And so a homeowner that is not as technically oriented may fall for this sales pitch. But I want to insist on this, that this is mostly a sales pitch. Lab conditions are not achieved when a solar panel is on the roof. Anyways, maybe a little too technical for this video. Let me move on to my reservations. Why I have reservations about central inverters. A, they're double the work for installers because nowadays installers still have to get on the roof and they still have to install an optimizer on the roof. You still have no choice. So you have to do a big, bulky central inverter on the wall, and then you also have to do an optimizer on the roof. That's twice the work. That's twice the work. I mean, it's as obvious as this. It's twice the work. If you're an installer and you just install microinverters under each panel, then you don't have to set up the microinverter, the central inverters. You don't need to set up the central inverter. You don't need to set it up. I think that's a major plus for installers. Installers, in my view, that's a major plus for them because you don't have to do twice the work. You have to do twice the work if you do a central inverter and you also do optimizers. This is also very interesting. You may no, depending on the installer that you choose, a lot of installers actually find it easier to install central inverters because it has happened that installers who are not as knowledgeable of DC current will just blow up. They will just blow up the central inverter because they do not know how to properly size a string. Properly sizing a DC string requires a little bit of skill. And if you're gonna be an inexpensive solar installer and you're gonna hire inexpensive electricians, people who have very little training on the job because you wanna be cheap, sometimes they end up oversizing the systems, not properly sizing the strings, and then the homeowner, come summer, realizes that the SolarEdge inverter is blown up because he didn't size the string properly. So there's a lot of installers that actually prefer microinverters because microinverters, you can't oversize or undersize on install day and decide how many panels you put on a string. You just put a little box under one panel, one and done. Each panel is its own system, and that's it, which I think is another big selling point. I'm very bullish on Enphase, so take that into consideration. I have my own biases for Enphase because it's my second biggest position, and I'm bullish on the stock. But anyway, central inverters, they last 12 years. They're warranted for 12 years. They're older technology. They're bulkier. This may be a more personal thing, but I think this would hold for a lot of people. Is that I don't want a 5 kilowatt DC string going anywhere through my house. I mean, this is too dangerous. You know, you drill something in the wall. You have whatever. You have 5,000 watts going through your house. That's DC. That's very dangerous in my view. So I don't want that. I much prefer microinverters, which require multiple connections between the control panel and the solar panel on the roof, and the energy is much more distributed. But anyways, that's just one point. A bigger selling point is that of course, if you get a central inverter, they're not upgradable. As your household grows, you can't really upgrade. All you can do is double it. So all you can do is get another central inverter and double the size of your system. And so most people don't want to drop another $30,000 just because they got an EV. Like an Enphase system, you can expand it very easily. You can be like, oh, I got an EV, let me put $5,000 worth of panels on the roof. One and done. It's easily expandable. You can't do that with SolarEdge, right? You need to double the install. So you need to properly size the install on day one. SolarEdge is not designed for complex roof. You know, if you look at this picture of SolarEdge, they show you a very simple roof. Well, most neighborhoods in the US, most fancier neighborhoods where the average customer of a solar system right now is located at, they're not going to have simple roofs like that. They're going to have complicated roofs with sides of plenty of different sides. And anyways, you're not going to be able to do that this easily. This is a system, if you look at it, it's installed very much like a commercial install. And these houses are the houses where the SolarEdge system is going to make sense. Very simple houses with a good orientation of your roof like this. These are ideal systems. Anyways, the problem is that you don't have redundancy with a central inverter. If a central inverter dies, you're out of power. That's it. There's no redundancy. And more importantly for me as an investor is that the subsidies of the IRA are nearly doubled at 11 cents per watt for microinverters. We are nearly doubled compared to central inverters. So that's a big selling point. Anyways, if you already knew about this, Probably not the most interesting to you, but if you didn't know, now you know kind of how I stand, and these are heavily debated issues. I always get it in the comment section. It's heavily debated issues, so it's perfectly fine for you to disagree with me on whatever I said here. This is debated. Anyways, moving on to the future, and this is where I think SolarEdge is interesting and keeps shining. So one of them is they're going to get into the utility storage business. They're getting into the utility storage business. This validates Tesla's thesis, and to a lesser extent STEM's thesis, is that they're developing their own standard utility storage. So these are fake peaker plants is the best way to describe it. In the evening when everybody gets home, power demand gets up. Well, these systems can just store energy during the day when people are at work, and at the end of the day they can just release more energy, just like a peaker plant would. So this is a little revolution in its own right, and they're getting the whole central inverters. They're doubling down on solar inverters, on utility inverters or central inverters. They're doubling down. I mean, they're developing a 330 kilowatt utility inverter. I'm like, 330 kilowatt, wow. I might call these macroinverters. That's a huge size. I don't want to get anywhere near that much power. It's 1,000 times bigger than a microinverter. So it's a different business. This is what they're developing. This is where they're headed in the future. This is an entirely different business than, say, Enphase, in my view. Keep in mind, the future, 70% next year, 70% of their sales are going to be commercial. They're in a different business. And they also have many, many more innovations. So the e-mobility, I would have to look into this. I'm a little concerned about that. I think they might be spreading themselves too thin. I don't like to see a business spreading itself across too many markets. To me, right now, yes, they're saying they want to scale residential. They're saying they want to scale commercial. To me, what's working really well for them is that scaling of a commercial, and that's more than enough of a reason for me to own that stock, especially knowing that there's synergies between scaling commercial and then, of course, utility level installs and storage for commercial. This is all synergistic. Residential, we'll see. We'll see how well they do in residential. It's 40% right now. It's growing because everything in solar is growing very fast. But the growth in residential at just under 50% is dwarfing the growth of commercial. The growth of commercial for them is growing at 115%. So it's growing well over 100% for commercial. So anyways, just one point. Charging technology, we're still working on that. That's still a product that they have. They released bi-directional charging. Bi-directional charging, I think, is going to be essential in the future. I mean, think about, a country with 200 million EVs. Those EVs could serve as a battery for the entire grid, right? You wouldn't need to have giant dams anymore. You could just use the automobiles in that country to store energy for the country itself. To me, this is fundamental. And there's two other fundamental aspects. Again, so we're focusing on customer service, a little bit of engineering service, that's fine, a little bit of manufacturing tech for them to be more efficient, that's fine. I think the systems and data is very interesting. This is where SolarEdge is headed, and Enphase as well. Is that what are these companies? Is SolarEdge and Enphase, are they going to become utilities? Are people just going to have a SolarEdge contract or an Enphase contract and buy their energy from Enphase and SolarEdge and sell their energy to Enphase and SolarEdge? This is how these two companies, SolarEdge and Enphase, can end up competing entirely against legacy utility companies. Right, because then they could be energy companies and they could resell electricity for industrial use to other players. I'm very optimistic about this, very bullish on this. And then I like that they're trying to get into thermodynamics, because to me this is the next stage. The next stage is obviously to me going to be heat pumps and the use of heat pumps for our homes instead of gas, and the replacement of gas heating by heat pumps heating. And it's still early. We're still very early, but heat pumps make a lot of sense, right? Heat pumps, they don't They don't heat anything. All they do is they move the hot air out of your house in the summer, and they move the hot air contained within cold air inside your house in the winter. And it's so much more efficient. It's 3 times more efficient than heating your home. And it would make sense that these companies would get into that. The HVAC business, the AC business needs to be disrupted. It hasn't been disrupted in close to 100 years, and it needs to be disrupted. And these companies may be the ones disrupting that because they have an incentive to do so, because then they can sell more solar if they have a solution for heating the homes in the winter. So this is all very, very fascinating to me. Both Enphase and SolarEdge have a bright future. This is SolarEdge specific, but these companies really copy each other all the time. That's what they do. Let's look at the growth numbers, right? Which is why I really can't understand why the stock crashed so much. 46% on average across the past 3 years in growth. A slight slowdown because of the US, and they were expecting to be past $1 billion in Q2 and in revenues, and they were not because of the slowdown in the US. And I'm like, that's not that big of a slowdown. If you look from 991 to 943, if you analyze that, this is a company that's still growing really, really well. It's still growing fast, this company. It's good. Gross margin, the gross margin, it's well anchored in the high 20s, low 30%. That's an excellent growth margin for a product that costs a lot of money, right? I mean, a lot of the companies I focus on this channel, they sell a product that costs $100 or $50 a month for a night at Airbnb. That's $200 a night. You need to sell a lot of those homes, so these companies need to have 80% gross margins. The big advantage of selling hardware like this is that your average customer, your average home, you're going to have $10,000 to $15,000 worth of equipment sales for your average home. So you're making only 32% in gross margin, but you're making that off of $10,000 to $15,000. So that matters, right? 30% matters. That's one of the big advantages of investing in hardware companies. Hardware companies typically have an average customer spend that's very, very high. And then the operating income, I couldn't easily put adjusted EBITDA here. I prefer adjusted EBITDA on this channel, but here operating income is what I found. It's growing quite fast. Actually, if you look at this company on traditional ratios that I don't look at, like PE, for example, I never look at PE on this channel. It's irrelevant for my style of investing. But this is a company that's actually very cheap on a PE basis, believe it or not. So pretty crazy if you ask me. And my conclusion. So valuation and conclusion. So what is my conclusion? So first of all, quickly going back to the spreadsheet that I always use on the channel, this valuation spreadsheet. I ask, how much am I paying for that growth? How much am I paying for each percentage point of forward growth that analysts are predicting? SolarEdge analysts are saying that SolarEdge will grow 33% over the next 12 months. At this price, you're paying a 0.23 for each percentage point of growth. You can see relatively, the most similar company to SolarEdge is Enphase. Enphase, you're paying a 0.42 for each percentage point of forward growth. You're paying much more for Enphase's forward growth than you are for SolarEdge's solar growth. In other words, SolarEdge, in my view, has corrected much more than Enphase. Enphase is cheap, but SolarEdge is even cheaper. Which means that I think a lot of these valuation differences have to do with the current narratives around the US and the US sales. But so it's very compelling to me to get into the commercial business of Europe. That's a business I want to be in. The commercial European business is a business that I want to be in. I think it makes a lot of sense. I think there's more density. Urban density in Europe is much higher, and therefore it makes a lot of sense that commercial would grow faster over there because of the density of population. right? So I like this, and I like that it's a different exposure. If I were to do a nutshell, is SolarEdge in a nutshell. SolarEdge is mostly commercial, mostly European. Enphase is mostly residential, mostly American, and the two companies are trying to enter each other's turf. Essentially, that's what they're trying to do. Each companies they're trying to compete in each other's category. Even with Enphase releasing its 3P microinverters and trying to get into the tri-phase electric commercial business, right? They are the solar duopoly. Both of them are the duopoly. I think they will both do well. Still prefer Enphase. Enphase is my biggest position. But keep in mind, I have my own biases. I may prefer Enphase because I've seen their growth in the US, because I see them in the US, because I live in the US, because I see their success. It's more easy for me to see their success because they're B2C. They're a B2C business. They're easier to understand, right? I see those batteries getting set up, You see everything. So that's the reason why I prefer Enphase. I might have my own biases, but I don't have a single issue buying some SolarEdge at these levels. Absolutely not, because I think the commercial business is the future. And let me conclude the video with this, with the growth. What has been the past return? For the past 8.5 years, you can see Enphase has beat SolarEdge. It's 31%, compound growth rate for as far as the return goes for Enphase versus 25% for SolarEdge. But let's face it, both companies are in the top 10 highest return companies in the S&P 500s, along with companies such as Tesla and Nvidia. So I am more than happy to add one of these members of the S&P 500, one of these top members of S&P 500. I'm so happy to add SolarEdge. And if SolarEdge keeps going down, I will be buying more SolarEdge. And this concludes my video. Let me know what you thought in the comment section. This was not investment advice ever. This is just entertainment. I hope you were entertained. Please hit the like button, hit the subscribe button, really helps me out. Thank you for watching and have a wonderful day.